They treated me like a wallet, not a father. So I left without a word, took the dog, and watched their world fall apart. Let me tell you how a quick stop at a pet store in 2017 changed my life in ways I never expected. My name's Eddie. I'm a 45-year-old long-haul trucker, been doing this job since I was in my 20s. Never been married, never had kids, just me and my old lab mix, Rocky. That dog's been my partner on the road longer than some drivers stay in the industry. We've seen every corner of this country together, and we're still rolling. My life was simple, not always easy, but it worked for me. It was a Wednesday afternoon, sometime in mid-September 2017. I had a few days off between runs and was back home in Springfield, Missouri. Rocky had torn up one of his chew toys on our last haul, and since he was looking at me like I owed him something, I decided to swing by the local PetSmart to grab him a new one. I remember I was standing in the aisle with the plush squeaky toys, trying to figure out which one wouldn't get destroyed in 5 minutes, when I heard a kid's voice behind me. "That one has a raccoon face." I turned around and saw this little boy, maybe 5 years old, pointing at the toy in my hand with wide eyes. He was blonde, kind of skinny, with a messy mop of hair and Spider-Man sneakers. Next to him stood a woman pushing a stroller with a baby inside, tiny, probably less than a year old, wrapped up in a soft pink blanket. The woman smiled and said, "Sorry, he's obsessed with raccoons right now." I laughed. "Well, this guy here." I held up the toy, "might be coming home with us then." That was the first time I met Kelly. She looked about my age, early 40s, with tired eyes and a quiet kind of strength. The kind of woman who looked like she'd been through more than her share but kept moving forward anyway. She had this softness when she spoke to her son, Tyler, and the way she bounced the stroller lightly while talking to me told me she was used to multitasking through chaos. Rocky came trotting up then, tail wagging like he'd just discovered the greatest store in the world. Tyler immediately crouched down and started petting him, asking 100 questions at once. What's his name? How old is he? Does he bite? Can he eat peanut butter? Kelly apologized again, but I shook my head. He's good with kids. Loves the attention. We ended up talking for about 20 minutes, right there in the aisle between the squeaky toys and the overpriced leashes. It turned out she lived a few blocks over from me, near that little church with the red steeple. She had just moved back to town after being away for a while, staying with her sister until she could get back on her feet. She didn't tell me much that day, just enough to mention that she was a widow. Her husband, Mark, had died in Iraq about 1.5 years earlier. She said it in that flat tone, like it was something she'd had to repeat too many times. I didn't push for details. I just nodded and said, "I'm sorry." She gave me this tiny, grateful smile that said thank you without saying it. I walked her to her car, helped load the baby's diaper bag into the trunk, and gave Tyler the raccoon toy for Rocky. "You can give it to him next time you see us," I said, without even thinking if there'd be a next time. She thanked me again and drove off. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her. There was something about the way she carried herself, the way she focused on her kids like they were her entire world, and nothing else mattered. She wasn't looking for pity or attention. She just looked exhausted but strong. I didn't expect to run into her again. Life has a way of making sure people cross paths once and vanish. But about a week later, I saw her again at the same store. This time, she remembered me, and Rocky bounded over like they were old friends. We started talking more regularly, bumping into each other at the grocery store, the park, a couple of times even at the diner on Main Street. Nothing planned, just these small-town coincidences that started happening more and more. One day she mentioned that Tyler kept asking when he'd see Rocky again. So I offered to swing by the park if I was in town. That became our thing. Every couple of weeks, when I wasn't on the road, I'd bring Rocky to the park, and Kelly would bring the kids. Tyler would throw the ball for Rocky until his little arms got tired, and Kelly and I would sit on the bench with coffee, just talking. It wasn't a love-at-first-sight kind of thing. More like something slow, natural, like two people who'd lived a lot of life, finally finding a little bit of peace with each other. And I didn't know it at the time, but that chance meeting in the pet store was the beginning of a story that would completely change the course of my life. So, picking up from where I left off, after that first meeting in the pet store, things between Kelly and me just sort of unfolded naturally. I didn't go into it with any expectations. I was just a trucker with some time between runs and a dog who loved attention, but every time we met at the park or bumped into each other around town, it felt like we were slowly building something. It started small. One day, I noticed Tyler's sneakers were held together with duct tape. They were these old red Spider-Man shoes that had clearly seen better days, and the kid still ran around like he was invincible. I didn't say anything at the time, but the next day, I stopped by the shoe store and bought him a brand new pair of Nikes. black with white soles, $120. Not cheap, but I remembered being a kid with worn-out shoes, and I didn't want that for him. I gave them to him the next time we met at the park. Kelly tried to refuse at first, said she couldn't accept something that expensive, but I just told her Rocky needed someone to help him chase squirrels and Tyler couldn't do that with shoes falling apart. After that, I started bringing over bags of groceries. Nothing fancy, just extra ground beef, pasta, cereal, a couple packs of juice boxes for Tyler. Sometimes I'd bring diapers or baby wipes for Bella. It wasn't charity. I didn't think of it like that. It was just helping out. Kelly never asked for anything, but I could see the way her shoulders eased a little when I showed up with a few extra things. She worked part-time at a diner, barely scraping by. I knew what it was like to live paycheck to paycheck. I figured if I had a little more to give, why not give it? The walks with Rocky became more frequent. Sometimes we'd go to the park. Sometimes we'd just walk around her neighborhood. Bella was usually in the stroller, Tyler holding Rocky's leash like he was leading a parade. Kelly and I would talk about everything and nothing. Her late husband, Mark, who she still missed, my life on the road, her dreams of going back to school one day. It was easy. Comfortable. Like I'd found a piece of myself I didn't know I was missing. The day Bella first called me Daddy caught me off guard. She was just learning to talk, saying things like doggy and juice and up. One morning, I walked in with donuts, and she was in her high chair, waving her arms and smiling. She looked right at me and said, "Daddy?" Kelly froze. I think she was about to correct her, but I just smiled and said, "Hey there, sweetheart." It didn't feel weird. It felt right. From that day on, she kept calling me Daddy. Tyler followed her lead not long after. He didn't say it all at once. He just started introducing me to people as, my dad Eddie. And that was it. No big moment. No speech. Just a 5-year-old deciding I belonged in their lives. Rocky, for his part, loved every second of it. He became their dog as much as mine. He'd sit by Bella's crib at night, walk Tyler to the corner when the school bus came, and sleep in the hallway between their bedrooms. He'd grown up on the road, but I think he liked having a home as much as I did. A year after that first meeting at the pet store, Kelly and I got married. It wasn't some huge affair. We didn't have money for all the bells and whistles, and we didn't need them. We got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, just us, the kids, her sister, and a couple of my buddies from the trucking company. Tyler wore a little suit with sneakers. Bella had a flower crown. Rocky even had a bow tie. Kelly cried when she said her vows, and I held her hand so tight I thought I might never let go. And that's how it started. Not with fireworks or drama, but with taped-up sneakers, shared walks, a few bags of groceries, and a dog who knew better than any of us what love looked like. So after Kelly and I got married, life shifted in ways I didn't expect. It wasn't just about me anymore, or even me and Rocky. I had a wife, 2 kids who were calling me daddy, and a whole new sense of responsibility that I took seriously. I wasn't trying to be some kind of hero or anything, but I knew that if I was going to be part of their lives for real, I had to show up in every way that mattered. The first big step I took was buying a house. Nothing extravagant, just a 3-bedroom place with a decent-sized yard on the edge of town. It had a swing set in the back and a little shed I turned into a storage space for Rocky's gear and my old tools. I paid for everything outright, used up most of my savings and put the rest on a decent mortgage I knew I could manage. I wanted stability for the kids, somewhere they could grow up without worrying about moving again or sharing a room with their mom at someone else's house. Once we were settled, I enrolled Tyler in a private school. It wasn't one of those elite academies, but it had small class sizes, good teachers, and solid programs that I thought would give him a real shot. Bella would start there too once she was old enough. I set up educational funds for both of them, just in case they ever wanted to go to college. I'd never been the kind of guy to think too far ahead, but something about seeing those kids every day, watching Tyler's reading improve and Bella learning how to say her ABCs, made me want to make sure their future was covered. That meant cutting back on the road. I started turning down long, high-paying hauls, those cross-country ones that kept me away for weeks at a time. My dispatcher didn't love it, and yeah, I was losing money, but I didn't care. I wanted to be home for school drop-offs, 4 dinners, 4 bedtime stories. I didn't want to be just some guy who showed up with presents after weeks away. I wanted to be there when Tyler got his first A on a math test, when Bella took her first steps without wobbling, when Kelly had a bad day and needed someone to take over bedtime. For a while, we really did live like one of those model families. Our mornings were loud and chaotic. Bella yelling for juice, Tyler losing his homework under the couch, Kelly packing lunches while I tried to find clean socks. Rocky would bark every time the school bus came and then settle at my feet while I drank coffee and caught up on paperwork. In the evenings we'd eat together, the kids would fight over who got to sit next to me, and after bedtime, Kelly and I would watch TV in silence, too tired to talk, but still together. But there was one thing that never changed: Rocky never really warmed up to Kelly. He didn't growl or snap or act aggressive. He was never like that, but he kept his distance. He'd lie at my feet instead of near her, follow me from room to room but stay behind when Kelly called. Sometimes I'd see him watching her with this alert, cautious expression, like he was waiting for something. I didn't think much of it at first. Dogs are weird sometimes. Maybe he just missed the road. Maybe he was adjusting to all the changes like the rest of us. But it stuck with me, the way he'd lie in the hallway between the kids' rooms at night, never too far from them, but never in Kelly's line of sight either. Still, I didn't question it. I had everything I ever thought I wanted. A family, a home, a reason to stay put. For the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing the next job, the next check, the next place to sleep. I was exactly where I wanted to be. So things didn't fall apart all at once. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It happened slowly, over time, in quiet ways that I didn't want to admit were happening. Looking back, I can see the little signs now, but at the time, I was too wrapped up in trying to hold everything together. Tyler turned 19, and I was proud of him. He wasn't a perfect kid, but he had a good heart, stayed out of trouble for the most part, and I figured we had a solid bond. I helped him buy his first car, a used Honda Civic we found through one of my buddies, and I was paying for part of his tuition at the local community college. He still lived at home, and I liked having him around even if we didn't talk as much as we used to. One Saturday afternoon, I was out in the garage looking for a wrench when I heard his voice through the cracked window. He was out in the driveway with a couple of his friends, leaning against the car, laughing. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, but once I heard my name, I froze. One of his friends asked him something like, "Is that your dad?" And Tyler laughed. Not in a mean way, just casual, like it was no big deal. Then he said, "Nah, my real dad was a war hero. Eddie's just my mom's husband." That was it. Just a sentence. Just a few words. But they hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. I stood there for a long time, not moving, staring at the shelves full of tools I'd collected over the years, remembering every scraped knee I patched, every bedtime story I told, every early morning I spent packing lunches and making sure he got to school on time. Just my mom's husband. Like I was some extra who wandered into the movie halfway through and stuck around out of convenience. After that, things started to feel different, even if nothing changed on the surface. Tyler stopped asking me for advice. When I tried to check in with him about school or work, he'd give short answers, sometimes none at all. He started coming home later, eating dinner in his room, barely saying hello. And I couldn't shake his words out of my head. Bella, who was 16 by then, had changed too. It was different from Tyler, but it hurt just as much. She went from being the little girl who used to hold my hand on walks and call me daddy to this teenager who barely acknowledged me. She started acting out, nothing outrageous, but just enough to show me that she didn't respect me anymore. She'd roll her eyes when I asked her to do chores, ignore me when I reminded her about curfew, and talk back in a way she never used to. I tried to talk to Kelly about it, to figure out how we could get through to the kids, but she wasn't the same either. Somewhere along the way, she'd become distant, detached. Always on her phone, scrolling through something or texting someone, even during dinner. If I brought up Tyler's attitude or Bella's defiance, she'd just shrug and say, "They're teenagers." Like that explained everything. She didn't take my side. She didn't back me up. She didn't even seem interested. It was like the house had shifted beneath me, and I was the only one who noticed. I still got up every morning and made coffee. I still paid the bills, fixed the leaky faucet, took Rocky for walk. But the warmth was gone. The connection I'd spent years building had started to unravel, and I couldn't figure out how to tie it back together. Rocky still followed me everywhere. He was older now, slower, with gray in his muzzle, but he never left my side. I'd sit on the back porch with him in the evenings, watching the sun go down over the yard I'd bought for a family that no longer felt like mine, and wonder when exactly I'd stopped being part of it. So by the time that Thanksgiving rolled around, I had already been feeling like an outsider in my own home. Things with Tyler and Bella weren't the same, and Kelly had become almost a stranger. But I still held on to the idea that maybe, just maybe, the holidays would bring something back. Some warmth, some sense of togetherness. I had a long-haul delivery scheduled that week, one I couldn't avoid, but I made sure to arrange everything in advance. I ordered the turkey, had groceries delivered, even transferred money into the household account to make sure everything was covered. I figured they'd keep it low-key, maybe wait to have a proper dinner when I got back on Saturday. That was the plan. Or at least I thought it was. Turns out I was the only one who believed that. I was somewhere in Colorado, parked at a rest stop for the night, when I opened my phone and saw the pictures. Kelly had posted them. Bright, perfectly lit photos of the house filled with people, the dining room table decorated, plates full of food, Tyler carving the turkey like he was head of the house, Bella posing with her friends on the front porch, everyone smiling like it was the best night of their lives. I wasn't in a single photo. I hadn't even known it was happening. No text, no call, nothing. Just a full Thanksgiving dinner hosted in the house I paid for, with food bought from my account, and they didn't even wait for me. I stared at those pictures for a long time. Then I scrolled through my bank app and saw it all, hundreds spent at the grocery store, a cleaning service, extra chairs rented from a local place downtown. It had all been done with my money while I was out on the road, sitting alone in a truck stop eating microwaved stuffing out of a plastic container. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to sound bitter or petty. But when I got home, it was like the whole thing had been forgotten. No one even mentioned it. I asked Bella how dinner went, and she shrugged and said, "It was fine," then went back to her room like it meant nothing. And that wasn't the end of it. A few weeks later, Tyler borrowed the truck. It wasn't unusual. He'd driven it before. My old Ford F-150, nothing fancy, but reliable, something I'd kept in good condition for years. He said he needed it to pick up something big for a school project. I didn't ask too many questions. I should have. That night I got a call from him, voice shaking, saying he'd gotten into an accident. When I got to the scene, the front end was destroyed. He'd been speeding, took a turn too fast, lost control and hit a light pole. The police report made it clear. He was at fault. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the truck was totaled. What hit me harder than the damage was the way he acted like it was no big deal. "It's just a truck," he said. "You'll get another one." Like I hadn't worked for years to pay it off, like it hadn't been my main backup vehicle, the one I used for local hauls. There wasn't even an apology. Then came Christmas. I had spent weeks thinking about what to get Bella. She'd been distant, cold even, but I still wanted to remind her that I cared. I remembered her saying she liked simple, elegant jewelry, so I went to Tiffany's and picked out a silver pendant with a small diamond in the center. $950, tucked into a soft velvet box with a ribbon. When she opened it, her face went blank. She turned it over in her hands and said, in front of everyone, "Oh, this looks like it came from some cheap place." I told her where it was from, thinking maybe she hadn't realized. She shrugged and said, "Well, it doesn't look like it," and set it aside like it was nothing. I didn't say anything. I just sat there while everyone went back to unwrapping their gifts, pretending not to see the way Kelly barely looked up from her phone. That's the part that really sank in. Not the truck. Not the money. Not even the pendant. It was the way they all acted like I was just there. A presence. A wallet. Not someone who had raised them, sacrificed for them, loved them like they were my own blood. So by the time Bella turned 21, there wasn't much left between me and the rest of the family but a shared address and a long list of unspoken disappointments. I kept my distance, went through the motions, tried to stay civil. But everything changed the day I found out, completely by accident, that she was engaged. Engaged to some rich guy from the city, the kind who drives a BMW and wears a Rolex to casual brunch. And I hadn't even been told. No announcement. No conversation. Not a word from Kelly. I found out when one of Kelly's friends accidentally let it slip during a phone call on speaker that I walked in on. Something about the venue being locked in, and how Bella's fiancé's family is taking care of everything. I waited for Kelly to bring it up, but she never did. That silence said everything I needed to hear. I was done. That night I called Frank, an old friend of mine from way back. We'd served in the same company years ago before he went into law. Now he had his own firm in town and handled everything from traffic violations to divorce settlements. I told him I needed help, and I wasn't interested in talking myself out of it this time. Frank didn't ask a lot of questions. He knew me too well for that. Instead, he came over the next morning with his briefcase, a yellow legal pad, and a portable scanner. We sat at the kitchen table while Kelly was out with Bella, and we started gathering everything. I pulled out the bank statements first, years of transfers, payments, purchases, every cent that came out of my pocket for school tuition, groceries, gifts, vacations, utilities, everything. Then we moved on to screenshots, texts, emails, social media posts. All the proof I needed that I'd been not just financially supporting the household, but that I was the only one doing so. Kelly hadn't worked in years. Her name was nowhere on the account. Frank walked through the house with me and had me photograph every major item, Furniture, electronics, appliances, even the landscaping tools out back. We pulled copies of the house deed, the vehicle titles, the property tax records. All of it confirmed what I already knew but hadn't taken time to lay out clearly until now. Everything was in my name. The house, the cars, the retirement accounts, the life insurance policy, even the damn Netflix subscription. Not a single thing was jointly owned. Kelly never asked to be added to anything. Back when we first got married, I just kept everything as it was. Under my name, under my control. I had never thought I'd be grateful for that decision, but sitting there with Frank, flipping through years of documentation, I felt a small, quiet sense of satisfaction. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was closure. I had given everything I had to this family, and now that they had shut me out of even the most important milestones, I had nothing left to lose. By the time I set my plan in motion, I had already made peace with the idea that this chapter of my life was over. I had spent years giving everything I had, my time, my money, my loyalty, to people who treated me like I was just a background character in their lives. The final push came when Bella got engaged and no one even thought to tell me. After everything I had done for them, they couldn't even give me the courtesy of including me in a family milestone. So I decided to act. No yelling. No fights. Just a clean, calculated end. I scheduled one final long-haul job, just 2 days out, enough to make it believable. I told Kelly the night before that I'd be out on a run, wouldn't be home until the weekend. She barely looked up from her phone when I said it. That was fine. I wanted her relaxed, off guard. I wanted her to think I was doing what I always did, working, disappearing, paying the bills. Instead, at exactly 11:15 the next morning, a courier rang the doorbell. Kelly answered, still in her robe, holding her phone in one hand and coffee in the other. The courier handed over 3 sealed envelopes. Nothing flashy, just plain legal-sized manila packages with her name typed neatly on the front. She signed for them without asking questions and took them inside. The first envelope was a full divorce filing. Inside were photographs, screenshots, bank statements, and itemized records showing everything, from money missing from shared accounts to unexplained purchases on credit cards, damage to the truck, even text logs that strongly suggested she had been seeing someone behind my back. Frank had helped compile everything, and we left nothing out. It wasn't just about ending the marriage. It was a formal accusation of infidelity, theft, and property damage. Everything documented. Everything ready to go to court. The second envelope was an official eviction notice. Since her name had never been added to the deed or mortgage, and she had never paid a cent toward the house, I had every legal right to ask her to vacate. She had 30 days to leave the property, effective immediately. There was no loophole, no argument, no bargaining. It was all within the law, and it was all airtight. The third and final envelope was a notification of asset reallocation. All joint credit cards were being closed. Any remaining accounts tied to her name, utilities, insurance, streaming services, were being removed and re-registered solely under mine. I wasn't going to let her bleed my finances dry any longer. That chapter was closed. Every line of access she once had was being cut off, piece by piece, without a single conversation. By the time I returned 2 days later, she was still in the house but quiet, cold. She didn't say a word when I walked through the door. The kids weren't home. Tyler was with friends. Bella was staying with her fiancé. Rocky padded across the floor and sat beside me like he always had. Like he knew this moment was coming. And Kelly? She just looked at me, held up the envelopes, and asked, "So that's it?" I didn't answer. Because yes, that was it. After the paperwork was delivered and the deadlines started closing in, Kelly didn't fight it. She packed her things slowly, bitterly, and left before the 30-day notice expired. With nowhere else to go, she moved in with her brother, the same one who had been calling himself the father at the wedding, and acting like I had been just a placeholder all along. He had always tried to paint himself as the family man, the one stepping in to guide Bella through life and support Tyler when he needed real male advice. Now he had to put his money where his mouth was, and it didn't take long for the shine to wear off. Kelly wasn't used to answering to anyone, especially not her brother. The arrangement quickly turned tense. She didn't have a job. She didn't have a car. And she definitely didn't have access to any of the accounts she used to spend freely from. The independence she used to brag about was gone the moment the foundation she had stood on, my name, my work, my support, was pulled out from under her. Tyler didn't take the fallout any better. Without the financial help I'd quietly given him for years, he had no way to pay for his community college tuition. The grants weren't enough, and he didn't qualify for loans on his own. So instead of continuing school, he ended up taking a job at his uncle's tire shop. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't what he had planned, but it was the only place that would hire him with no degree and no real work history. I heard from someone around town that he was miserable, changing tires and sweeping floors all day, and I didn't take any pleasure in that. But I wasn't stepping in again. Not after everything he'd said. Not after I became just my mom's husband in his eyes. Bella didn't escape the consequences either. Her wedding never happened. The groom's family had apparently done their own digging not long after the engagement announcement, and whatever they uncovered, whether it was financial, personal, or both, was enough for them to pull the plug. Fast. The fiancé broke it off just weeks before the planned date, and everything unraveled. With no college plans, no job experience, and no fallback, Bella took a job waiting tables at a local diner, the same one Kelly used to work at when I first met her. She doesn't wear the Tiffany pendant anymore, not that I expected her to. And me? I stayed in the house. I rebuilt it in small ways. New furniture, fresh paint, cleaned out every drawer that held pieces of a life that had ended. Rocky's still here, older now but steady as ever, curled up at my feet every night like he always has been. Life after everything changed didn't happen overnight, but little by little, I built something new. After the dust settled, I threw myself back into work. I didn't just go back to driving, I expanded. I took the experience I had, the routes I knew, the contacts I'd made over the years, and started growing my own business. Now I've got a fleet of 7 trucks and a solid team of drivers who handle routes across several states. It wasn't easy getting here, but every truck on the road feels like a reminder that I didn't fold when things got hard. With the extra income, I bought a new house out in the country. It's quiet, peaceful, surrounded by trees and space. There's a big garage where I keep my tools and a fenced-in yard that stretches far enough for Rocky to run free again. He's slower now, but he's still got that spark in him, and I can tell he loves it out here. After all those years riding shotgun in a rig, he finally has a place where he can just be a dog. He earned that. About 6 months after I moved in, I met someone. Her name is Jenna. She runs a small diner off Highway 32, the kind of place where the coffee's always hot and the regulars don't even have to order. We started talking when I stopped in one morning after a delivery, and it just felt easy. No games, no drama, just 2 people who understood what it means to work hard and not expect handouts. She respects what I do, not just the business, but the hours, the grind, the responsibility. That matters more than I ever realized. We're taking it slow. No pressure, no rush. But for the first time in a long time, I'm waking up with something to look forward to. Someone who looks at me and sees me. Not what I can give, not what I can pay for, just me. In the end, I came to understand something I wish I had known earlier. Being a father isn't about sacrifice without limit. It's not about being walked over, used, or discarded the moment you stop being convenient. Being a father doesn't mean being a victim. I did what I did out of love, and I don't regret that, but I know now that real family, the kind that matters, is built on truth, respect, and loyalty. Rocky taught me that without ever saying a word. That dog stood by me through everything, from long nights on the road to the silence of an empty house. He never asked for anything but to be near me, and in return, he gave more loyalty and honesty than most people ever could. That's what real family looks like. It's not about blood or legal ties. It's about who stays when it's hard, who doesn't need a reason to stand beside you. I don't carry any anger anymore. No bitterness, no resentment, not even sadness. Just peace. Peace because I walked away when it was time. Peace because I built something new from the ground up. And gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, for the second chances, for the quiet mornings in the country and the freedom to live on my own terms.